North-South Connection. It has been a minute since a new Behind the Connection with JT, but I'm excited to be back here. I honestly think it's been a few years since I've done one of these, but it felt like no time like the current to do this one, both with a project we got going on and with a guest that I really want to do this with anyway, even before we came up with the NoSo 95 concept. And that is my good friend, Mr. Primetime Kevin E. How are you doing, Kev?
Let's do it. Very good. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. It's been a minute. I had a little vacation, so I feel like I haven't done a podcast in a while. So if I'm a little rusty, you can loosen me up a little bit. But you and I were partners on a Chronoso a little while ago, and I know you've been keeping up with that. So it's glad to have you here in the fold. And just a refresher, because it's probably been turned over quite a bit since I last did one of these. This is me talking with my friends about how they got into wrestling, their journey as a wrestling fan. Normally we throw on a show that means something to the guest. I don't know if this does to you, but I picked it because I wanted to keep with the 95 gimmick. And we'll get to what that is in a moment. But I usually take about an hour. We'll just kind of go through, again, life as a wrestling fan, we'll bullshit a little bit. There's a specific topic we'll get into with you as well that kind of put us into orbit with each other. But you may see if you're watching on video, and again, this is simulcast here on the North-South Connection YouTube channel, as well as audio on all podcast applications, but it is under the NoSo 95 banner. If you're wondering what that is, just real quick, it's a year-long project we're doing here at the North-South Connection, paying tribute to the year that was 1995. So we'll be having different content around wrestling, pop culture, sports, different stuff, just here and there. It may be our current shows touching on something in 95 like this, or it may be a special podcast. I know we have a little rewatch of Uncensored 95 coming up. I guess you probably longtime listeners can guess who's going to be running that. I think we'll do some stuff around WrestleMania time as well. So all that said, tonight we are going to go behind the connection with Primetime Kevin E. And Kev, I guess we'll just give some quick background, right? So you've probably been in my life longer than you realized when we met last year. And that is because you and your friends back in the 90s had a public access backyard wrestling promotion. And me being a public access and a wrestling nerd, used to watch religiously the USWF. And I just was a big fan. I never really knew, like any of you, obviously. Travis Savage used to come into Stop and Shop when I worked there every now and then with a camera. But beyond that, I didn't really have any familiarity. Fast forward to, was it August or September of 2024? And as fate may have it, you and a couple of the other fellows from USWF happened to be in line behind me and my brother when we were going to meet Hulk Hogan at the liquor store for the Real American Beer signing. And it was pretty early on. We waited, 3.5 hours probably that day in the sun.
Yeah, I thought I was going to have some heat stroke that day.
It was a
few people did. I thought it was going to be one of them.
Yeah, that poor guy in the ambulance where Hogan pulled up. Like, you come that far, you croak right before he shows up. But it was early on in the wait that I heard you guys mention USWF. And you said it in a way that it clicked for me that you were the dudes that were in it. And, I fought off my nerddom. Like, I didn't want to look like that guy, but I was like, when is this? Like, this was meant to be. So I turned around right away. I was like, did you guys do USWF? And you were like, yeah, that was us. And I'm right into the storylines. Oh, I remember, this and this character and that character. And I definitely remembered you, I think, the most of the three of the guys that were there, just from look and name. Like, Primetime Kevin E is one that kind of stands out, obviously. So I remember that name pretty well. So that, again, long story short, that's how we kind of, became friends. We figured out we lived in the same town. Ran into each other basketball tryouts. So it's like now we're kind of in universe together, which is really cool because, again, it was a big part of my teen years. So I know I've talked a lot. I'm going to let you talk in a moment. But
now, you knew Glenn Grunge, you said, right?
I do know Glenn Grunge, yes. That's for those that have been a long time place to be listeners. Adam Murray from the NBA A-Team over on the Pop feed, a place to be. He does that basketball show with Andrew Reese. Him and I went to college together, and he was Glenn Grunge in the U.S. and Icebox. Those are his two names in the USWF.
I never knew his real name, so that's crazy.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's very Adam that he would never tell you guys.
It's not really Glenn. I thought his name was Glenn.
Definitely not Glenn. He was just a big grunge fan, I think. I don't remember if Glenn Grunge came first or Icebox came first, but
yeah, I'm not sure. No, I think Glenn Grunge came second because he was doing the Raven deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. He was a big ECW guy. The funny thing is, again, just like you, like when we met at orientation in college, I was like, dude, were you in USWF? You look familiar to me. He's like, yeah, that was me. So I remembered him right away when I saw him. I'm like, oh, this fucking guy. But really cool. So I on this show, again, I mentioned earlier, we usually would throw on something that maybe meant something to you, a favorite show, but keeping with the 95 gimmick, wanted to pull out something from this time in 95. So there's a great YouTube account. We'll give him a shout out, Wrestling with Paul, that we're going to be throwing on in the background. And it's basically just a compilation of March 1995 in the world of WWF. If you want to watch along, we're going to start at the beginning. It's like 3 hours. We're not obviously going 3 hours, but just something for background noise. I don't think we'll end up referencing it much, but it's fun to have on the background anyway. So do you have it queued up, Kev?
All set to go.
All right, let's do it in 3, 2, 1, play. All right, so as that fires up, bring me to Warwick, Rhode Island in the 80s. How did little Kevin E become a wrestling fan?
Oh, I actually grew up in East Providence.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, so I didn't start off a wrestling fan. I think the first time I even knew what it was either kindergarten or first grade. Somebody brought in one of the it wasn't the WWF magazine. It was I don't know even know if it was a PWI. It was one of the black and white ones.
Yeah,
and it was
the
like
wrestler
a picture
or
of
one of those. Yeah.
it was a picture of somebody on the mat and their face was all bloody, and they just said like in big black letters, blood on the bottom. And I was like freaked out. I'm like, I want to know part of it. I'm like, what is this? And so I think when I first really got into it, it was actually my neighbor, Uncle Bob. We were
Was he actually
outside
your
playing.
uncle? Or just the guy you
No,
called?
yeah, just once we got closer, we just started calling him. He was like a member of the family.
Yep.
But we were outside playing one day. We had just recently moved to that house, and he's like, "Oh, you guys want to watch wrestling?" I'm like, "What the fuck is wrestling?" like,
What?
like little, like, So we went over there and like had like the little black and white TV on his porch outside, and his wife was watching. And I still remember the match. It was an Adrian Adonis squash match before he was gay. So it was like leather Adrian.
So 80.
Adonis.
This is like 85-ish then, probably.
Yeah, maybe a little earlier, I think.
84,
But around that time. And so so I think after that, like we were full on obsessed. But like I remember in the beginning, not fully knowing like because I still thought like wrestling and boxing was like the same shit. So I'm like,
Right.
oh, sometimes they fight with the gloves on, sometimes they take them off. So like I'd be drawing pictures of like the wrestlers, and like I remember like it was like Jimmy Snuka with boxing gloves on. Like I didn't know. Then like afterwards I realized, okay, these are two different
things. Might have been
things.
better in that hotel room if he had boxing gloves on.
Well, I think I know, right? I wasn't expecting it. But
I guess I don't know.
Rest in peace, Nancy. Was that her name, Nancy, as well?
Yeah, that's a bad.
Yeah.
All right. This is my last one of those. That's a bad name to have. This being a
I know, right?
significant other, I guess.
Yeah, and like so my Uncle Bob's wife, she was obsessed with wrestling, and like they used to go Jack Witchy's sports arena to watch wrestling back in the day.
Yep.
What was that, Attleboro or something? Before it burned down.
I think it had to be Southern Mass, right? Because I don't think it was a Rhode Island thing.
Yeah, and she would always tell us a story. One of the shows, she hit Fabulous Moolah with her pocketbook.
Should have knocked her out.
Yeah, that was her big story. So we were always like amazed by that. But yeah, that's how we first got into it. I think the whole boxing thing to me started too because Piper and Mr. T at WrestleMania,
right?
Yeah. The boxing match. Oh my god, they box sometimes. I don't know. But yeah, we started figuring it out, and I think WrestleMania 2 we saw on HBO. We still weren't getting pay-per-views for whatever reason. They played on HBO. I don't know if you remember that.
Right. Yeah.
A few months later, and then we started getting the pay-per-views somewhat regularly. Like I remember WrestleMania.
You're an early adopter, man. You were in. How old? What were you? When were you born? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
76.
Okay, all right, yeah. So that tracks. Because I was born in 80 and I started watching in 90. So you're 76, watching 86. Yeah, about the same. Right around 10 years old. You're really kind of heavily getting into it.
Yeah.
Who did you gravitate to right away? Was it heels, faces, Piper, Hogan? Like, kind of who drew you in? Anyone, or is it just the whole concept and presentation?
I think Hogan, along with like everyone else around that time. Yeah, definitely Hogan. We were obsessed. We got the Hogan Hillbilly Jim tag team 2-pack for Christmas. The LJN one. We got the ring. We were all in. And Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. I remember watching the A-Team and Hogan and like Ricky Steamboat were on, and that blew our minds. Like oh my god, like so. Yeah, we were, WrestleMania 3 was our first pay-per-view, and
That's
I
awesome.
still remember we were begging my dad all day for this pay-per-view. Like like all day from the second we woke up. Now it's like the pay-per-view starting in like less than an hour. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but my dad was a very religious man, and he was friends with all the priests like from our church, and they would come over and hang out. So I remember that Sunday, Father John Baker from the church was over. So I'm like, this is our chance. I got my brothers. I'm like, listen, Father John's upstairs. I'm like, he's not going to say no in front of Father John. So we'll get him to say yes. And before he leaves, we got to order this pay-per-view. And so, of course, we went up there and we're like, oh, can we please get the wrestling show? And I like the look our dad gave us, like, what, he knew what we were doing. And then he's like, he didn't want to, be a heel in front of this priest. So it's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll order it. And I'm like, no, we'll do it now.
You don't need to do. We'll call.
Because back then there was East Providence cable. So you have to give them the number on the, on the bottom of the cable box.
So you had the converter box early too then, right? Because you needed that special box to be able to get the pay-per-view, I think.
Yeah, we always had like the box from day one. So, we did all that shit. And I remember after the Father John Baker left, it was like hell to pay. It's like, don't you ever do that.
At least he didn't turn it off on you, Miss Hogan.
No.
We had Dimension Cable we're in West Warwick, and you needed that specific box, and we didn't have it. We just had like the direct cable. And I remember Rumble 92. So I started watching 90, and I used to go to my cousins for some and my buddies. And Rumble 92 I wanted to order, and he waited. It was the same fucking thing. He waited forever, and then he couldn't get the box in time. Like, because of whatever reason, he couldn't get there and get it set up. So I had to watch it all. I watched the whole 92 Rumble completely in scramble vision.
Oh no!
Which, if there's a show to do, I guess, is Gorilla Bobby on that show. You can it passed the time just fine. Listen to the two of them. Yeah. But I made sure after that we get that freaking box. I'm like, I don't want to risk ever missing another one at that point. So 87, you're into it. Was it like a large, like how many, like what was your siblings situation? Like, was it just you guys? Or you in it with friends? Like kind of what was the?
It's pretty much just us. Like, and yeah, people in school were also into it, but like we were like, we took it too far. Like, I think the most my school ever got into it, because I remember like it was like one of those things like people kind of like didn't really admit even back then to being a wrestling fan. Yeah. This was like maybe third grade. And I remember after one particular moment, it was when Steamboat beat Savage for the IC belt. That's like the first time I ever heard like people in school, like the day after a show, like go nuts to like, oh, new IC champ. I'm like, wait a minute, you guys watch wrestling? Like, everyone was like a closeted wrestling fan. So
they would show up in the big moments.
But hold on a second. I just got and I am done. All right. Have to do a quick message. It's pretty much just us. Yeah, we were like, we eat that shit up. We rented every wrestling video at like Major Video, like our local rental place. Like, we just couldn't. It's funny because like back then, like we would just consume everything we can get our hands on. It's like, and like we want to know what came before. So like, oh, who was the champion before Hogan? Okay, Iron Sheik. And then like, because there was no internet, you couldn't find anything else.
So easily just go dig into this stuff.
Yeah, you have to like piece things together from like PWI and stuff, and like kind of work your way backwards and shit. But like, which is funny because I notice like fans nowadays, it seems like they'll go up to the Attitude Era and they stop there. They won't go,
Well, I feel like even that we're not going. I feel like people are going to like the late 2000s or something. You know what I mean? And going from there. So it's kind of crazy. Thinking like, I mean, the Attitude Era now is 26 years old. So think about like, for kids that were say 25 now, right? That was us in 2005. Like that's where we were as wrestling fans in 2005. It's for kids that were born in whatever 2000. So it's nuts to think back on, because for a long time, like WrestleMania 6 was always in my mind a few years ago. Oh yeah, this is a few years ago. And now it's like 35 years old.
Oh yeah, I have no concept of time. This is like when you said 95, I'm like, oh, what the fuck was that? Like it just I don't know. I don't know. It just seems like yesterday. Everything's just like yesterday to me. Like
for sure. The did you ever rent that stupid 1 hour Hulkamania tape? That like I'd never been angrier to have wasted a rental. There was one Hulkamania tape that was like 45 minutes and like 3 matches, and I've never felt more gut punch when I go home and realize it was only 45 minutes. I'm like, this was my rental of the week, and I wasted it on these 3 stupid Hogan matches.
Was he standing up on it? It was like a blue cover, and he was kind of like this, like that on the cover. Yeah. I think they had the Sheik match on there, right?
I think so. And then there was like a squash on there. It was awful. I was so angry. I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, now I gotta wait another week or whatever to rent another one.
That might have been the one we got one, and there was like footage of him and Mean Gene teaming up, and I was like, never been more confused. I'm like, when the fuck was this? Like, why did they team up? Like,
it was tough piecing it all together. I was lucky. My cousin, and we can transition to this in a minute because I'm curious the production aspect of what you guys are doing. But so my cousin, that was kind of my main buddy that watched wrestling starting in '90, was pretty early with technology stuff. So he had the 2 VCRs, so he would dub a lot of stuff for me early on. So he'd rent tapes, we'd dub them. So I built up my collection like pretty early on, just through him, copying stuff that either we'd order, he'd make a copy, he'd find it at a flea market, or he'd rent it at the store and make a copy. Sometimes you get the tracking thing when you try and dub the tape that was officially from the rental store. But I had a pretty decent VHS collection early on, which allowed me to explore back just from, again, him dubbing stuff over. And I learned, a lot of what I'd eventually do from a tech standpoint, whether it was video editing, podcast, whatever it is in the future, back in wrestling, really started for me with him. Because even when we started wrestling ourselves, before we were filming anything, we were just doing it in the basement. We created our own promotion, and he had like dubbed all this like music and cut the songs with the lyric, and that was like really early on. That's like 91, 92. He's like using, 2 tape decks and cutting tracks together that we had. And I still have the card somewhere with all the wrestler names on them and the stats and all that we did before we get into actually videotaping. But the whole reason we started doing what we called WCF in my backyard was on the heels of USWF, because I watch it religiously. I'm like, wow, this is like, these guys live near us and they're doing this, we can do it. And we had always planned to put it on public access, and we just never did. It just seemed like a lot, so we just did it for ourselves in the end. But I'm curious your transition from, 3rd grade, living in East Providence, Father John and the brothers, and the family watching, to like ending up in Warwick with Travis Savage and everyone else, putting on public access wrestling. So like kind of bridge me to that journey. Did you ever dip out of wrestling, or have you been in since that point? Did you dip and come back during that little gap, or like, is that right through?
Well, no, yeah, it was pretty straight through. Like before USWF, we were doing our own backyard thing just at our house. Me and my brothers, and we had a friend. My friend Rob did some stuff. This kid Danny Melfi came down. There's a few people. It was called EWF. EWF. We did that, and then from there,
was that filmed at all? No, that never aired anywhere, right?
No, yeah, we filmed it, but yeah, it never aired anywhere.
It was just you guys in the yard. Yeah.
The closest we came when we started USWF, we brought our EWF title. It actually made a few appearances on USWF.
I knew I knew the EWF from somewhere. I probably saw that, I'm sure, because it sounded familiar when you said it.
Then, but yeah, so I was doing that, and then at the same time, I was very big into me and my friend Andre. We were doing prank phone calls and recording them, and he called me one day. He's like, oh, I was watching public access. There's this wrestling thing called Power League Wrestling. He's like, they do a phone number at the end. You have to prank call them. I'm like, again, like now this is around junior high, maybe.
Yep.
And
you in Warwick right now, or are you still in East Providence?
Still in East Providence.
Yeah.
Yeah, like now in junior high, I'm not really telling people I'm a wrestling fan. So he's like one of my best friends. So he doesn't even know like I'm watching wrestling on like Mondays, you know. So I'm like, yeah, I'll call them. I'll record or whatever. So I want to watch an episode first. So it came out like Wednesdays at 2. So I watched it. I'm like, oh shit, this is pretty cool. They were filming out of a church lunchroom, like no Catholic school lunchroom. The Bishop Keogh High School, I think it was called, in Pawtucket, Providence. Yeah, and so so I'm like, oh, like they had like a wooden ring they made with like gym mats and clothesline for ropes, whatever. So I'm like, oh shit, this is pretty cool. So anyway, long story short, I went to go prank call. So I'm on the phone, the thing's ringing, and this guy answers, Tommy D, one of the guys that ran it. So instead of pranking him, I just fucking joined on accident. And I'm like, oh, can I come down and check you guys out? So that's it. So so I did. So I showed up there for my first taping, and that's where I actually met Travis Savage, Rob. He was actually there as well for Power League Wrestling. Him and Big Man Dan were a tag team called Surfs Up. And I had known Rob because we both used to call this the same AM wrestling show.
Yep. Was it Cody Boynes or something else?
Yeah, Cody Boynes. Yeah, wrestling rap on. I think it came on Sunday nights. From on this AM radio station. We could only get it in my brother Mike's room on his alarm clock radio.
Yeah, I used to every Sunday be like, "Come on, come on, Cody, come in." When he finally got on public access, was awesome because I was like, it was a godsend because I used to try and want to call in and listen in, and God, it's such a different time. Like, and does it make you mad? And I want to get back to this, but I don't want to forget to say this. Does it make you mad that like these friggin' the Rizzler and all these guys, like we were doing all this shit, like all these, like I know we're doing stuff now, but it's like we did all this as kids too, but there was no major outlet to like reach the world. You know, we were cutting edge as well. We were doing stuff with, you know, I was editing with a video camera, 2 VCRs and a, you know, radio. It's like what the fuck? Like we didn't have all this shit. We were putting out good stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, me and my wife and my kids, we watch all the prank guys on YouTube, like Nerf and like the Nelk Boys, all that shit. And I'm like, these guys are fucking millionaires doing the shit we were doing for free on public access with no monetization.
Doing it for fun half the time. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah. What was I? Oh yeah, Power League. Yeah, so like the Cody Blunt show. Yeah. I was actually my name on there was Kooky Kevin when I would call up. Rob, Travis Savage, his name was Ravishing Rob. Yep. My brother was Maniac Mike. Terry Funk actually gave him his name on the air on Cody Boynes because he's like, oh, this is Mike from East Providence, and Terry Funk's like, oh, yeah, from now on you're Maniac Mike, and so like that's how it stuck.
That was his name. That was his name in USWF too, where he carried it over.
Yeah, he just carried it over from the Cody Boynes show. Yep. So plus it was cool. Like, no, Terry Funk named him, so I'm like, yeah, you gotta keep Maniac Mike, like. But yeah, so and I had met Rob a few times at like indie shows in Seekonk at the American Legion Hall. And so when I saw him there, I knew who he was. I'm like, oh shit, you're doing this too? And like it was both our first times. He ended up doing one more show, I think, and then he started USWF, which they were doing the Bedroom Wrestling Federation, and then it turned into USWF on public access.
Did Bedroom air too? Because that sounds familiar too.
I'm not sure. He might have snuck some BRWF stuff. Yeah,
that sounds familiar. So what is this? This has to be like 93 ish.
Yeah, because my dad was giving me a ride to those first few shows because my dad passed away in 95. Yeah, so it must have been around 93. So.
Yeah, that sounds about right timing wise. And sorry about your dad. That era is so Wild West. So the indie was NEWA, or was it something else in Seekonk at the time?
No, it was Coastal Pro Wrestling was one of them. Yeah. And they had Renegade Wrestling was another one. I think those are the two major ones. So it was guys like Nick Steele, Bob Evans, what's his name from ECW? Just Incredible.
Oh yeah,
started there because he lived in like Fall
River. He's from Mass. Yeah, he's from Southeast Mass.
It was because like he would actually a few times waited in the parking lot with me and my brothers until my mom got there to pick us up. Which, like, looking back at it, it's like fucking crazy. Like we were kind of like being babysat by Just Incredible for like a little bit.
And then full circle, we went to go see a show in, it was either Webster, Mass, I think, or something. My buddy John Walters was working, and Credible was on the show, and he bummed a lighter for my friend Andy. Never get back to him. So there you go, full circle. We hung out at the bar after the show, and
sounds about right from the stories I've heard. But
yeah, so NEWA was the big one I remember really watching, and that would have been, I think that was like 92, 93, 94, because that's when friggin' Raymond Roy started popping up like he was a local celebrity at every WWF house show and everything. He worked the crowd at the WWF house shows and then became Pierre the Mountie on there. He was like the NEWA champion forever. But those shows are interesting. Like they bring in some names. Like I remember Warlord popping in there, and Snuka came through there, and some others. Was he Spellbinder? I think was one guy that they really focused on. But
I still remember the first time I heard about NEWA. I was actually in California. I was in San Jose with my my uncle and cousins and my aunt for the summer. I was there for like 3 months. And so my brother Mike called me from like back home. And every year East Province does it's called the Heritage Festival at Pierce Field. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, you're not going to believe this. We were at a Heritage Festival, and they brought out this guy called Kid Liberty, and like they announced a new promotion starting up in Rhode Island called the NEWA. I'm like, what? I'm like, are you serious? Yeah, I was like, I couldn't wait to check it out, and like, I finally saw it on public access, and it was funny. Like you could tell, like they weren't trained. Like,
yeah, it sucked. But at the time, I think what gets lost in all this is like, and not by us, but by others. Like now you have, I mean, look, we're watching a compilation of March 95, like at our fingertips. Back then we were starved. Like wrestling wasn't everywhere. And you only had so many damn tapes where you had to rent them. And blank tapes were like hard to come by too. So you had to scrounge if you wanted to record stuff and have stuff to watch. So anything like that was airing was gold. It's like, oh, I can watch wrestling on a Saturday night at 10. Like, I don't give a shit if it's just crappy stuff. It's 3 hours in some gym in, Pawtucket. Like, who gives a crap? It's wrestling. And there's some names on there, and it's guys you start to care about and start to follow. But yeah, that era is just, we had our own little indie world in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And it's just it's like lost to time because I think it's just so small and niche. Like it never made like PWI or that shit when you looked at the local promotions or anything. But
yeah, I remember we didn't even know what hate watching was, but we were like hate watching NEWA because like, they had guys like Orca and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like Orca the Killer Whale. There was like a guy called remember Dr. Feelgood was another guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this fucking guy doesn't even have gear. He just he's probably like a janitor at a hospital, stole some scrubs. Like,
definitely. And who are the midgets? Half Nelson? Was that one of them?
Tiny the Terrible and Half Nelson. I've actually been at parties where with full Tiny the Terrible. Actually, yeah, I actually gave him a ride once in my old Corolla. I think we were at a party. We had to go to a liquor store or something. He's like, yeah, I'll go up with you. I'm like, what is even going on right now? I'm like, I got Tiny the Terrible in my car. Yeah, he was actually. It was a party at Rob's house. Travis Savage's like back in like he would just have like these big events at his house, and we'd be like ripping apart his garage and setting bonfires in his yard. Like this, he was like hated by his entire neighborhood. Like,
I imagine. Yeah. I mean, the jealousy was high for me. Like watching you guys do that, and because when I grew up in West Warwick. It was on a main road. I went to school in Cranston because I went to a Catholic school, and then I went to high school at Hendricken. So like, I didn't have and this might not have been the situation, but to me, it felt like the situation. Like a bunch of those guys lived near each other. They just go over each other's houses and do wrestling after whenever they wanted. For me, we used to have to plan like weeks and months in advance. Like, okay, on this Saturday, we're all going to get together because no one lived near me, and we had to really plan it out. And then having the ring, which I'm guessing was permanent in this backyard, right? Like it looked like it, was like mind blowing to me. I was like, this is fucking amazing. I wish I lived in, this neighborhood where I could go do this stuff. It just seemed like another world to me. That was like,
we didn't even like live there. Like I remember so I was doing Power League, but they only did shows on Sunday. So it's hard for me to get a ride after my dad passed away. Like I wasn't driving yet.
All right.
Well, I had my license. I didn't have a car, so I couldn't take a bus. I was just busing it, wherever I needed to go. But then, like, my brother Mike is actually the one that found USWF, and I'm like watching it. I'm like, oh shit, that's like Ravishing Rob from Power League, and so they had a hotline number. So my brother made a plan to go down there, and then I remember I talked to the guys in Power League. I'm like, oh, would you care if I wrestled for this USWF? I'm like, I'm only kind of like doing
I love the
you guys'
politics.
show, yeah, like part time now. And then like it was kind of like, yeah, we kind of wish you wouldn't. I'm like, oh, I'm barely showing up to these tapings now as it is, because of my ride situation. But so I'm like, oh fuck it. So I wore a mask. I had this American flag hanging up in my room. I just ended up tying it around my head. I'm like, oh, I can see through this thing. So like, I just wore that in my first USWF match. I was called the Cyclone Kid. Like I was supposed to be like a luchador or some shit.
Right.
But
that's what I think of when I see you is luchador.
Yeah. So it was me and my brother Mike and the Reaper against Rob, Big Man Dan, and Grandmaster of Funk, I believe. That was our first match. Then eventually I'm like, oh, this is stupid. I just took the flag off and I started wrestling as myself. But like I didn't want to be caught in Power League. I was Madman Kevin E. And so I'm like, I'll at least change my name so it's kind of different still.
Right.
So yeah, I just stole my name from Brian Lee. We were watching ECW once at Rob's house. I'm like, oh, Primetime Brian Lee, Primetime Kevin E, whatever. I'll go with that. So then eventually I just dropped the Madman gimmick.
Well, the name worked because it stuck with me all these years.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw you, I knew you was Primetime Kevin E. So you joined up at USWF, and like, what is the cadence of all? Because it's hard to know what was new and reused a lot of time. Like I'd see stuff like I already saw this. Like how often? So now we're into what? We're probably into like 94, 95 in there somewhere with the heyday of USWF, because we started WCF in 94. So I had to have started seeing USWF like around that time already, I'm guessing, for us to start doing what we were doing. But like, what was the cadence? Like, was it weekly tapings? Like you mentioned tapings for Power League, but like, was there a set cadence? Did he actually like schedule out who had to be, or was it just kind of like, hey, we're gonna wrestle today. Whoever comes down, we'll come up with some shit.
From what I remember, there was set tapings on the weekends where everyone would be down there. But he was like neighbors with I don't remember, Iron Man was one of the guys. So he was neighbors with Iron Man, and then Grandmaster of Funk lived around the corner. So they would also do stuff if like whoever was around during the week, right, they would also film stuff. But then they would have like the formal tapings like on the weekend, like I think it was like a Saturday.
Was it like
Saturday
every week?
Sunday. Yeah, every week. Yeah,
that's wild. What if it rained? Did you?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
I kind of feel like there was some in the rain, maybe in the winter. Did you guys go in the winter too, in the snow?
Sometimes, not so much in Rob's yard, but in Stray Cat's yard, it was like a year long. We would snow, and right. we didn't stop for anything. Like, then like it was funny though, because those winter tapings are fucking horrible. Like we were all wrestling in like winter coats and shit. Like it just like looks horrible. Like nobody wanted to bump
winter coats.
Yeah, nobody wanted to bump because like the ring was frozen solid. So it would have been better off taking the winter off, but
you had enough content. Well, we would go inside in the winter and wrestle in my basement, which was probably as hard as the fucking frozen ground, because it was one of those like cement basements and they had the rug on it, which was like, a quarter-inch thick. Like, so it hurt like hell. We'd put like tarp sheet, blanket sheet, and like to try and pad it. But you guys did do at least one. Was it like a boxing gym or something? It was like one big event at a gym with a real ring.
Yeah, you just reminded me. Yeah, before I showed up, Rob was they were renting out the Impossible Dream in Warwick.
Oh, is that where it was?
Yeah, they did a few shows on there with before I joined up. I remember seeing the footage, but then I guess there was a fire there and they couldn't get it for that winter. But we were renting out Cranston Boxing.
That's the ones I remember, because it was a big like tan ring. And actually, I think I have one. I have one event on tape somewhere, because I think I taped it just to like whatever reason. I'm going to dig it out for you. I have it somewhere.
Power League was actually renting that first. That's how we found out. That's how we knew that place even existed, was through Power League Wrestling. They were doing shows there for a little bit, And so then that's what it was. When winter came, we went there because I remember I wrestled Rob in a match, and I actually we took the match outside, and I had him up in a body slam position. We went outside. I crossed. I think that was whatever main road that is in Cranston. Remember, I crossed the street with him in a fucking body slam position, and I slammed him into a snowbake on the other side of the road. Just like people driving around, like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
yeah, I definitely remember that. The was it Ultra Slam? It was something like that. What the hell was the name of the show? It was like you guys really built toward it. I remember because I guess why I taped it because it was like
Wrestle Slam. It might have been.
Yeah, it might have been.
Remember, he had one called Wrestle Slam.
I remember there was a match on that. This is like almost borderline embarrassing. There was a match on that show with. In the match, a guy kept doing nut shots, and I remember it was like Nagget. I think he called it Nagget.
Naggets, yeah. In the Naggets, yeah.
Was that his name? Was the guy's name Naggets?
No. That's what I guess. Like, so not to piss off public access, he would just say Naggets instead of nuts.
Right.
So.
Oh, I remember there was a match, and they had a counter in the bottom, and for whatever reason, whoever was doing it kept doing it through the match, and I remember I was dying watching it because it's like Nagget 1, Nagget shot 2, and it was just all like low blows the whole match. And I remember it was at that show. Yeah. And Wisco was on that show. I remember Wisco.
Oh yeah, I think Wisco's the first pedophile wrestler before before pedophilia was all the rage.
Yeah, he definitely was. He definitely was a pet. That's right. That was his gimmick.
Do you remember? Because Rob's house was in Apponaug, and there was one year. There was it was like a group. I don't know if they were like summer camp kids, but they were going down the road, and there was like a lady's like, "Oh, look at this butterfly. This bird is called whatever." And I guess like somebody had seen them like down the road earlier. They're like, "Oh, there's like a group of like summer camp kids coming. Put on the Whisker outfit because he was like a pedophile." So I remember like Big Man Dan got the Whisker outfit on. And so, like, now they're finally going by Rob's house, and the lady's like, "Oh, look at that beautiful butterfly." He goes, "Yes, look at the butterfly." And it's like, just like talking to these kids, like it was just like just like spur of the moment. You know what I mean? Like there was like an opportunity, like, oh, we got random kids. This is perfect.
These kids had no clue what they were involved in at all. I remember that show too. There were like two older guys that had a match. Was it Ravishing something? It was like they both seemed older than all of you guys, and like
Rich and Ed McDermott.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. It was Ravishing Rich, right?
Ravishing Rich and Adorable Ed.
Yeah. And they had a match. They wore like I don't know if I remember all this, but they definitely. I remember they stuck out because I'm like, what are these? Like their uncles fucking came down and had a match or something.
Well, we actually knew them because they used to go to the Seekonk shows at the Legion Hall. And then I think they were going to the Renegade Wrestling School or the Coastal Pro Wrestling School. I remember like they were telling me they trained for a little bit. But yeah, like we had known them from like before, and like they showed up. They left for a little bit, and then they ended up coming to Stray Cats Yard as well down the line.
Yeah. So how did that transition happen? So like how long were you in you? Were you into the end pretty much? Like because if you joined in like 94-ish, say. And then it lasted quite a while, right? It was into the early 2000s, wasn't it?
Yeah. Then, I think when it ended in Rob's yard or in Stray Cats yard?
Just overall. So what's that transition like? Like how did it move to Stray Cats? Because Rob started like, so to say, I mean, if anyone, no one knows what the fuck we're talking about, but Rob is the guy that ran this. He was also kind of a local public access known guy. Travis Savage was his name. And he would pop up on like, it was such a weird crossover universe because I'd see him on, Ulysses Dance Party or whatever, like all of a sudden, hey, here's Travis Savage, right? And then he had his own show where he would go around. And that's why I had seen him in Stop and Shop every time. He'd come with a camera, they'd throw him out. And he was going to all these different stores and different places and just recording himself. Doing stuff, and random man on the street interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was the SCLA show.
Yes.
Living in
South Central Lower Apponaug.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that actually, when we were doing USWF, we were also hanging out afterwards. Like I was going through like spurts where I would just like pretty much living at Rob's house for like the week. Like I just wouldn't leave, and like And so we would just like film stuff of us hanging out. And like I was a big like 80s metal fan, and I loved Skid Row, and I had like these Skid Row VHS tapes. So it was pretty much just them, highlights of them fucking off on the road, like playing pranks on each other, drinking, just doing dumb shit. So I'm like, oh, I got all this footage of us just fucking around, goofing off and shit. So I was gonna do my own public access show called Yellow Snow, which is pretty much gonna be what SCLA was, ended up being. And so, but I never ended up doing it. And so like Rob's like, oh, I'm gonna kind of do a show like you were doing, call it SCLA, whatever. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, yeah, no, I didn't, I don't own that style of,
but it was,
whatever.
Again, it was early adoption. Like, yeah, it was probably being done. Now everyone films freaking everything, but at the time it was like unique. It wasn't being done on like a mass level. So again, it was like a little bit cutting edge of a concept. You see in those a lot of those documentaries, and even like the infamous Man Mountain Rock, like WWF. I don't know if you've ever seen those in like the European tour. Like he did something similar in the locker room and it leaked out. Yeah. But yeah, it was just such a unique concept at the time. So who was like, you're filming this, like, what are you editing? Is it just like, did he have editing shit, or was it just like a VCR and he'd cut it and pause it? And then was Rob doing it, or did he have someone doing the production?
No, he started off, it was called Play School Painter. It was a children's toy you could draw on this tablet and it would show up on the TV. So that's what he started with, and you could make the titles and stuff. But then he got I forget what it was called. It was like this gray editing thing, at a keyboard, and so that's what he started using towards the end, like for.
Was it an Avid?
It might have been. I remember when my brother Glenn took over the show, like the editing. He ended up buying one as well. We found it in some catalog, the exact same one he had. But I forget.
You weren't actually. I always envisioned. I thought you guys were editing or using like Cox's equipment. Like you would film it and then go to Cox and they would. That was in my mind. I'd created this, I guess, situation. Because that was the one thing I didn't do a lot of, was like graphic stuff, because I didn't have that. A lot of mine again was more editing, just kind of linear VCR to camcorder or reverse, cut music in. So you would someone schlepped out of Cox every week, drop the tape off.
No, the closest we ever came with doing anything with Cox was my brother Mike. He had his own show on East Providence cable. I don't think it was statewide yet. It was called Powerbomb, the all wrestling talk show. But he filmed it from his room. But then we found out you could rent equipment from Cox Cable.
Right.
No, not Cox. It was the East Providence Cable still, I think. Yep. But yeah, so we're like, oh shit, we'll get like one of their professional cameras. So like we're like, I remember we took him out a few times, like big case with a professional camera, and we borrowed lighting from them and shit. Yep. So like we had like all like studio lights in my brother Mike's room and shit. Like but then it just became like a pain lugging all this stuff to him.
Yeah, and that stuff was gigantic at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember the show, so it must have been statewide at some point. I remember Powerbomb,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, yeah, I think it was statewide. Yeah,
because around that time was when Cody also went. That was like 95, 96 when Cody got on public access too, and he'd have the show in the studio. And you guys actually went and did his show a couple times, right? Like, was it like Rob, a birthday cake or something got thrown around?
Yeah, Rob, Dan, and I think Grandmaster of Funk did the Cody show. Yeah, that was birthday cake. And I remember, if I remember correctly, they got in trouble for that because they weren't supposed to get cake all over the place. I guess they said, oh, you could smash it, just don't get it in the carpeting because the cable studio will get mad. But sure as shit, Rob, you knew that was going to end up everywhere.
Yeah, once he told him, that was it. I mean, I love, like, I didn't, you don't know at the time, and then you look years back, it's like Cody was legit just reading the fucking Observer, It's like, he's like some dialed in guy or whatever, like, oh, he had the pulse, he had contacts in the business, and then you go back and you're like, he literally just is getting the Observer every week and reading it.
Well, Cody was funny because, like, he'd always get WCW guys, and I remember, he had, like, Rick Rude on, and I think it was, like, right before Slamboree, like, Rick Rude, like, he was like about to go out the curtain in like 5 minutes, and he's on the air with Cody. And I remember my brother Mike's like, "Oh yeah, hey Rick, when you come out, can you just like wave to me in the camera?" And like Rick's like, "No," and then like then we'd run to the TV and we're watching. I'm like, oh, let's see if he does it. And he didn't, but
That's funny.
yeah, it was crazy times. I'm like, and then like, you go to school the next day and be like, oh yeah, we were on the phone with Rick Rude right before he came out on pay-per-view, and everyone thinks you're fucking lying. Like,
right? It's like, how would that even happen? Like,
yeah,
it's mind blowing. At the time, yeah, Cody. Yeah, I mean, that was like, especially in the summer, like that was appointment viewing. Like I didn't care what was going on that Wednesday at noon, whatever it was. Like I was inside. I don't care how nice it was. If I was outside playing baseball, whatever. Like I'm going to watch Cody Wednesday at noon or Thursday at noon, whatever it was, to make sure, I get the latest and greatest news. I did try and track him. Yeah.
Oh, go on. Oh,
no, I did try and track him down at one point when we had the Place to Be podcast going, because we were doing a lot of different interviews, and like, man, I kind of fell through a rabbit hole on Facebook, and I couldn't really, like, he kind of vanished. There's not much out there on him. And then I got to know Brutal Bob a little bit through Kevin Kelly when we were doing the podcast with him, and I think he had given me a contact of some sort, and then I just never chased it down. But he definitely seemed to have just like disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah, like just I remember like towards the end, like Cody, he made an announcement on the air. It's like he's like, yeah, nothing's really happening in wrestling, because I think like WCW was gone, or like there was just nothing going on.
He lasted that long into like the past.
I think so. I remember him saying like it must have been because I remember his big thing was there was like nothing to talk. There was like no news happening,
right?
Because like I think so. It must have been. Yeah. Like I'll have to double check my brother Mike, because he's like an encyclopedia with this shit. But
yeah.
I was gonna say earlier, it's funny. Like Cody Boynes, we actually went on a bus trip with him with the radio listeners to New Hampshire for a UCW show. I don't know if you know John McAdam. He does Stick to Wrestling podcast. Yeah. So it was the promotion he ran back in the day, back in the 90s, whatever. So, which is funny because my fucking parents were so overprotective in Portuguese. Like, but like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to New Hampshire on a bus with this guy from AM radio, and like to this day, I don't know how we pulled this off. Like, I don't know why they ever allowed this, but yeah. So yeah, we went up there for the show. It was pretty crazy. And remember they threw us out of the.
I just remember the Cody outfit, the polo, the khaki shorts, and like the loafers with no sock. Like it was just like the boat shoes or whatever, and like then the mullet.
Yeah, it was we would tape trade with him too. I remember getting tapes in the mail from Cody. Like it was a weird time. And he actually had a second bus trip planned to Raw at the Manhattan Center, but he couldn't get enough people to fill the bus, whatever, so it got scrapped.
That would have been cool.
But I remember begging my parents to go to that one, and that actually ended up being the Raw where Marty Jannetty came out of the audience in the hoodie.
Oh, that would have been an awesome one, yeah.
Shawn Michaels, yeah, for the belt, whatever. I'm like, I remember being, I'm like, we should have been there. Like,
yeah, such a weird time. All right, so Travis, how does that get passed to Messier?
Well, he starts doing the SCLA stuff more than the wrestling. Like at this point, like, yeah, he just wasn't into the wrestling aspect anymore. He just wanted to do like the SCLA stuff.
Right.
And so he ended up selling his ring to Stray Cat, who was coming down. Which was funny because like Stray Cat was like, he wasn't very heavily pushed on like when it was in Rob's Yard, but then all of a sudden the ring gets sold to him. Yeah. It was like a stark, like, it's like, imagine just being a viewer and you don't know any of this background shit. Right. Yeah. Cause like, he was like a homeless character on our show on like in Rob's Yard. Then all of a sudden, like he goes from like, drinking puddle water and like living on the
like
streets.
Fucking Tommy Dreamer when he takes over.
Oh yeah, well it's coming out to like
California. No, not California. Red Hot Chili Peppers, right?
No, later on, but in the beginning he had like a Shawn Michaels phase, and so so I forget. I think there was a storyline reason like how he wasn't homeless anymore, but I can't remember it.
I definitely remember the Chili Peppers because I remember. Like, because there was a stretch there, and he took over. Weren't there like more fans and stuff? Like you'd have like watching and stuff like that. or at least
Oh
me
yeah,
as a
yeah,
wrestler sitting out there. But
yeah. But yeah, people would show up. There was a lot of randoms that would make their way into it. But yeah, that was and that yeah when it first went to his yard, it was me and Grandmaster of Funk booking. Because like that was one of the things, like yeah, we'll put the ring in your yard, but we got a book that lasted all of like 3 shows, and
right,
like it was pretty much like I'm booking. If you don't want it, you can leave. So I'm like, oh, I guess you're booking now. Like,
it's
uh,
yours.
yeah.
Yeah, so he
So
takes over, and I think that's why I started to wane a little bit. Like I definitely remember him as champion, and I remember the Chili Pepper song. So it sounds like that was a little bit into his run. So I'm sure I was with it longer than I remember. Um, by that point, I probably gone to college and was only watching when we were coming back. I'm guessing when I was coming back for winter and summer break and stuff like that. I mean, WCF for us only lasted like a couple years because it was just hard. Like again, I didn't have people local, so like we had to really plan ahead, and then I didn't have a ring to set up, so I'd have to set it up every time. We used like volleyball poles and string or whatever, and then we just started doing like Travis, like we started just doing other stuff that didn't involve wrestling because my parents were never crazy with the wrestling. I think they were just always afraid we're gonna get hurt, so we just kind of moved into like just doing other shit that was like skits and stuff like that versus in ring. And as you get older, it just gets harder anyway. But one comment I wanted to make too, because like we're talking backyard wrestling all the time, and I meant to say this at the top. This was like backyard wrestling before it became like a thing. Like that they did that fucking home video in like late 90s or 2000s, and like it was all violence and like, you know, glass and jumping off roofs, and like that's like what I think people think of a backyard wrestling. But in the early 90s, it wasn't that at all. We were doing like we were more like storyline and characters and moves and stuff and you guys were the same. I think later with Stray Cat, when that stuff became in, I think you guys got a little bit more toward that, but for a long time it was not that. And then it kind of when it became like when wrestling got cool and backyard wrestling became a thing, and you know the videos hit the internet and all that stuff, then it just became gratuitous, like, you know, like stupid superhuman and those guys just putting themselves through, you know, wreckages. But for a long time it wasn't that.
yeah, we're on. I think it's either volume 2 or volume 3 of the best of Backyard Wrestling. I think Tombstone Tony sent some stuff in. So it's
I
got
love the fucking names that just come up randomly.
yeah. So it's so there's footage of him, I think, choke slamming Ryan Starr on top of a U-Haul truck, made
Yeah.
it on one of those. And then there's some stuff in Jay's yard, and you see me on one of the clips like filming in the background, like I'm doing like a second.
These are
camera
like the
shot.
later years, right? When like the violent stuff became more of a thing. Because in the
Yeah,
early USW wasn't like some you guys did some stuff, but like most of it was like kind of characters and goofiness, and not even goofiness. You guys did moves and shit, but it was definitely not like what you'd see in those tapes, where it was like glass windows and light tubes and jumping off
oh
roofs and
yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah. We followed suit afterwards with the attacks and
Right.
there was glass. I think
Yeah, toward the end.
yeah, ladders and shit. I remember we actually I actually got my brother Mike kicked off of public access. Got him suspended because we did a skit on his talk show where we got into a brawl. Then we took it outside, and then I had him light he dumped hairspray in a steel chair, and then he hit me in the back with it. And then like when we went to go watch the show the following week, and it didn't come on. And then they called the cable company. It's like, oh, you guys didn't play my show. And then he's like, yeah, you're suspended for like a month or whatever. Then he's like, why? He's like, oh, last episode you lit a chair on fire and hit somebody in the back with it. And my brother Mike's like, yeah, but like, why is my show suspended? And like, he's like, the lady repeats herself. He goes, you lit a chair on fire and hit somebody over the back with it.
It's amazing. I was probably sitting at home being like, what the fuck? Why isn't the show on? And then randomly pops back up a month later.
Well, yeah, USWF got suspended a few times too. Once I think it was somebody got wrapped up in an American flag, and I think Big Man Dan or somebody splashed them while they had the flag on them, so they got kicked off of that. And then I think there was in Jay's yard, we did a match. The loser must drink the winner's piss match. And so I think they got banned for that one as well.
Was it the actual piss?
No. It was funny because they were supposed to get apple juice for the piss, but then like nobody bought the apple juice, and so Stray Cat just ended up like I think it was like wow, it was one brand of generic soda his dad would buy at BJ's or some shit. Continental Cola. That's what it was. Yeah. It was it was just soda. It was like black. It looked like motor oil. Like it was the weirdest looking.
This guy may want to get checked out. I actually did know one other guy. I think he played. I don't know if I want to dox him on air, but he played. It was like an Undertaker type character.
Oh, Reaper.
The Reaper.
Yeah,
remember his name? Who he was in real life?
Oh, we were friends on Facebook for a little bit.
Jimmy.
Not sure.
Jimmy. I won't give his last name, but it was Jimmy.
Yeah. I think he deleted me, but yeah. He actually quit a little after me and my brothers joined up.
That's right.
Because we had our first. It was my first match was me, my brother Mike, and Reaper. It was a 6-man.
Yeah, because I remember I had seen him. And then when I started working at Stop and Shop in '97, he worked in like the meat department or whatever. And I was like, holy shit, like were you USWF again? And then it turns out my brother-in-law now is actually, they were like best friends because they went to school together or work or whatever. So I see him, a couple times a year, cookouts and stuff. And I was like, again, this is all very Rhode Island. But so him and Adam were my two USWF connections that I knew. And again, I knew like Travis from popping in the store and I talked to him. And then I had a couple of friends that went to like Tollgate with him or whatever that knew him. I found out later or whatever, but that was pretty much the extent of, I think, all I knew as far as I know. Maybe someone under a mask or something. But
now your Tollgate friends that knew him, did they ever tell you anything about a party he had at his house called Pornopalooza?
No, I'll have to ask. I'll ask my buddy who knows him. So don't tell me what it was. Let me ask him and get the story. And if he doesn't know, I'll come back to you.
All right. Oh man,
I don't think I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't think so. That sounds like a part 2, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So USWF ends, but it seems like you're still in contact with a lot of these guys, right? Like, I mean, obviously you were with a few of them, meeting Hogan. I just see on Facebook now that we're friends. Like you guys get together every now and then too. So it's a cool bond. Some of you have.
Yeah. And it's funny because like again we're like we started off in like completely different ends of like Rhode Island, like pretty much like if I never did backyard wrestling with them, I wouldn't be like living down in the Kent County area now. Like I met my wife because of the show.
Right.
She was friends with Bad News Kenny Roper back in the day. That's how like we met. Like she came down to watch us wrestle. Everything just kind of branched off from there.
Yeah, it's crazy how that. Again, this is I know this happens in small towns, but Rhode Island is a state that's like a small town where this stuff just, again, like the odds of us running into each other, that Hogan. I mean, the odds are high that we'd both go see Hulk Hogan, but he was at like 4 different places and we could have been in, 3 people deeper on the line. I probably wouldn't even heard you guys talking. We would never would have known. Right. So just getting there when we did, and arguing with that fucking lady.
Yeah.
All mad when Mike came and cut the line or whatever. And she was like, she was not happy.
They're about to open the doors. You might want to get in line. Oh, what do you mean?
Oh, that was so good. That was so good. She was dying. It was killing her. You might want to go back in line. We were here. He's like, I was meeting my fucking friends.
And it was funny too, because like then she'd be talking shit about your brother, and he was just no selling her the entire time. Yeah, he wouldn't even like pay her any mind. He's like, hey, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, you take one look at him, I don't think I'd be taking shots. She's gonna have to get her boyfriend knocked out or whatever. But
oh man,
yeah, that was a day. So
yeah, we actually brought wrestling back though after Stray Cats. It was like 2000. Shit, again, I'm the worst at dates. Like maybe 2010 it came back again.
Did it feel weird going back to it? Because I feel like I tried to do something like that at one point, and it was like it's hard to recapture the magic sometimes and like get back into it. But did you guys actually like, did it last a bit, or was it just kind of, oh, we tried it and it fizzled out?
No, it lasted for like maybe another 5 years because we were actually renting. We were renting real rings,
Yep.
So we were renting a ring from RWA, like T Phoenix and those guys, and then we were also renting from Chris Blackheart over in Woonsocket, Showcase Pro Wrestling.
So where was this
His
airing?
building.
Were you on like YouTube at the time, or was it still like public access?
We were back on public access. Yeah, we were.
Were you the
I
only
was
thing
bringing,
on? was that it?
I think so. Yeah.
That and the town hall.
Yeah, we had a YouTube as well. I forget who was putting the shows up on YouTube. It might have been like Arnie or James Gannon. I forget who was doing the shows. But yeah, we were still doing public access as well. I was driving the tapes up every week over on Niantic Ave, but which was weird because they'd have like the weird like it's like some weird like it was always like a weird like Nigerian show being filmed whenever I dropped it's like a guy like in a purple suit like yeah it was yeah
Wasn't Ulysses?
No, and it's funny
Party
like
thing.
it's funny you should say that though. Were we the only ones on the air? Because like as I'm bringing these tapes down, I'm conscious of this. What's going on? I'm like it's 2000 something. I'm still bringing VHS tapes. Like they were still using VHS. Like I found CVS that still sold them. They're like on the bottom shelf. They're all dusty. I'm like, why am I still buying VHS tapes? I'm driving to Providence to this like unmarked building on Niantic Ave. That's a public access building. And I'm like, and people are working here. I'm like, who's paying these freaking people? I'm like, how is this profitable? I'm like, they must be making some sort of income. And then I'm like, there's Nigerians here filming the show. Like, it was bizarre.
I used to like, I think Costco and then BJ's eventually still sold into the mid 2000s, the big blocks of tapes. And they were like the 8 or 10 hour ones. You get like 10 of them. And I used to just load up on those because I would say until probably until the network, because when it still was like Dirty F 24/7, Dirty 24/7, I would record all of that. So I have my wife hates me. I have a bin of tapes in the closet. It's like 150 tapes of like Dirty 24/7 programming because you couldn't watch it all. It was like on demand, but I would just record it and walk away and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was still buying tapes like into 2010, 2011, 2012. I think even ordering them on Amazon at one point. I have like a stockpile of VCRs because the new ones sucked. So I still have ones from probably 95 that work that I keep in my attic. I have like 3 or 4 of them just stashed away. I have a all-in-one VCR TV that like the cable thing broke off. So you can't even watch TV on it really anymore, but the VCR works. So I kept it because I'm like, eventually they're not going to make these. And if they do, they're going to suck. And I don't want my tapes to get eaten. So I actually went through, it might have been during COVID, probably during COVID. And I digitized like all my like both my family home videos from when I was growing up and WCF and my other shit we film. And I went through and put it all on digital. I have it all on a Google Drive now in 2 hard drives that I've stashed away. Because I'm like, at some point, like these tapes are not going to work. Like they're either going to disintegrate completely or VCR is not going to be made. And I don't want this stuff completely lost to time. Guess whatever. But so I went through and I digitized everything at some point because I just want to have it.
Yeah, my wife actually got me for Christmas the video to digital converter thing. So that's gonna be my project this year, trying to get. And I'm gonna throw some shit up on YouTube as I come across, like, because I've got stuff. I used to bring my camera to school, and like I've noticed like on YouTube those videos get like lots of like attention, like 90s kids or whatever,
high school in 93 or whatever,
Yeah, and it's funny because it was still the full size camera I had, so I'd be like sneaking this thing to school. I'm just like, recording shit. But I gotta ask you something though. But you brought up VHS tapes. When did you finally stop recording wrestling? And why? Like, do you remember when?
Like us wrestling or like on TV wrestling?
On TV, yeah. Like saving.
I think I stopped recording when DVR started. So that would have been like 04, 05. And then it just became like something like a 24/7 where there's the only way to capture it. But I don't think I was recording like raw anymore because I would just DVR it. But I have like every raw from like 96 to 98 on VHS. I still have them all. I have like everything I recorded I have. So it was like 90 through 98 is the bulk. I have some stuff into like 02. And I have like every pay-per-view on VHS until at least 2012 probably. So like I have a tape with Over the Limit and Bad Blood, whatever it is. And all just still in my closet over here with all my magazines and DVDs and other stuff. But it, yeah, I mean, the early days scrounging for those tapes was like I taped over my dad's old movies he'd record, like whatever I could find, I would just like pull out of like the bin, like, oh my God, I found a tape with like 3 hours free. And meticulously. I used to tape all the Seinfeld episodes. I have all 9 seasons of Seinfeld on VHS. So yeah, I have all that stuff still. So I'd say my 90 through at least 02, I'd record things. And then I have that whole run of pay-per-views in 24/7 until 2012. And then it really was when like DVDs just really became paramount. And then even then I was buying like DVD comps and shit, like even into the early 2010s. I would say really when the network started, kind of ended everything. And that felt like because I'm like, oh, everything's on here now. So
yeah, I remember for whatever reason I thought I had to preserve everything. Like it was my job. Yeah, it's my job to preserve, because if I wasn't recording this, these would all be lost to time. I had no idea YouTube would ever start. You know what I mean? Like
who knew?
Everything would be click away. And I just envisioned myself one day I'm going to be an old man in a nursing home surrounded by my videos. And that's how I was going to spend my day, just rewatching this library.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized, I'm like, I have all this shit on tape. I never watch it because there's always new stuff to watch. So it's like this never ending cycle. Like
you just keep adding to it.
Where am I going to watch? Yeah. Where am I going to watch like Raw from like, February, 97 or whatever. I'm like, it's always gonna be Ross to watch. Like, I'm never gonna have time to. With this,
and those tapes got me through some time. Like when I moved after school, I moved to Connecticut for work, and I was there by myself for a little bit before my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, moved to follow. And I didn't have cable at the time. I forget why I didn't get cable right away. Whatever reason. Back then, you used to like take weeks for them to fucking come out and set it up. And those tapes got me through those early nights, like, because I had nothing to do. I was by myself in a new city with no one. And I just rewatched all those 96, and this is like 02. I rewatched those 96, 97, 98 Raws. And that I just laid there, put the tape on, read magazines, and watch the Raws. So those tapes, like, they did come in handy at those times where it's just like, but then eventually they started making the DVD compilations and more stuff came on TV, and then the internet, you could watch stuff. So I would say that's when it really started to dwindle, probably is in those early to mid 2000s. But funny enough, you mentioned like the dying days of public access. When I moved back to Rhode Island in 2005, I was looking for a job, and it must have been whatever East Providence cable may turn into. It was like East Bay cable. It only served like Barrington, East Providence, and it was some holdout from Cox that was like only in the East Bay, and they had a job opening for public access manager or whatever the fuck. So I went and interviewed. Like I'm like, listen, like, you are not going to find a bigger public access fair than me. I will treat that like I could not believe I didn't get this fucking job. I don't know what they were looking for. That must have been nepotism or something, because like I went in there and I poured my heart out. I'm like, I watched public access my entire life. Like, here's all the stuff I used to watch. Here's how I would bring this to life and manage the station. Like, I had such a vision because it was my entire youth was like public access TV, like I loved it so much. I don't know how I didn't get that job. Like, I feel like I sold them hard. So it must have been something. It's probably for the best. I'm sure it went under like a year later or whatever, but it was the dying days. But
what were some of your favorite public access shows? Like what were your go-tos?
USWF, obviously. Party Thing with Ulysses. I'd watch Caprio sometimes, the judge. Was there another judge before him, or was he the only one that was ever on?
Only one I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
SCLA for sure. NEWA. There was another fucking thing I used to watch endlessly, and they would always show, it was the same thing they would show. It was like a 2-hour episode, and it must have been someone from NEWA doing it. And WWF was in town, and they interviewed like Macho Man. It was like at a like X Games thing, and then they would show footage of NEWA. I'll never forget it. It was this band. It was like a 3 singers singing "Step It Out" by Joe Jackson at a wrestling show, and they would always show that. I wish I might have it on tape somewhere. And it was like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and it would air like every couple of weeks. And it was never anything new. It was just, and I'd watch it every fucking time. It was like captivating to me.
Did you watch Daphne's Madhouse at all?
That sounds familiar.
the Star Trek lady.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and
And then
my
her.
neighbor, my buddy Josh was a big Star Trek guy, so I think we would watch it sometimes.
Yeah, because it
Cody,
was.
obviously.
Yeah, it was her. She had her Star Trek show. Then there was Star Trek, the unofficial fan club show, was another one I used to watch.
Was there a
And I
guy?
wasn't
There
a
was a
big.
guy in the studio?
It was yeah. They ended up in the studio, but it first started. They used to do it on like wicker lawn furniture inside. I remember it was like two guys, and then like and I wasn't the biggest Star Trek fan, but like I just like it. I couldn't stop. It was on public access. I couldn't stop watching the shit. Like then there was the Kiss show, Rock and Roll
Yeah.
Night with Ed Bradford. We'd watch that one. Then
I remember the Kiss show.
there was a yeah, and like we were also like recording these. So, I had to preserve all these. So like but like and like I want to get those on public YouTube as well. But like after a few floods and shit I had on my old house and stuff, like a lot of tapes got ruined. So like
Right.
I don't even know what's left. And plus I've also been looking for a specific commercial from back in the day. Do you remember it was an auto dealership commercial? The guy goes, "If I can bend steel with my bare hands, I can approve you." Remember Super Credit Man?
Yeah. That sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
Yeah, I've been looking for this commercial, like, and I've seen people online, they're looking for it. And there's like a guy on YouTube, Red Cow Entertainment, Frankie. I don't know if you've ever seen those guys, but they've been looking for the commercial. It's like this missing local commercial. I'm like, so
I may have it on tape somewhere. I mean, I got so much
yeah,
stuff.
I've been going through like tapes and shit, but
I used to cut the commercials a lot though to preserve space if I was watching live. Like I kind of wish I had them now because it's such a moment in time, but it was premium. That's like
yeah.
35 minutes worth of space right there per show, like to save on commercials.
My brother Mike actually was to save tape. He would not record the ring entrances.
Oh,
And I'm like, you're gonna regret this one day.
no,
I'm like,
definitely.
yeah. So
And
like,
then he dubbed
I
all the
think,
music. That could have been all the music. I had all the music.
yeah, yeah. I don't think that ended up lasting too long. He went back just recording everything again. But I just remember like it was like it was freaking me out. I'm like, how can you not do the entrances?
I definitely have that at least part of that USWF show on tape, and I probably digitized it because I went through and digitized like everything I had just to make sure I had it. So I'll pull up my hard drive for you over the next week or so, and I know I have it. I'll send you the link. I have it on Google Drive, so I can put it in the Google Drive, and I'll see what else I got. But this was a blast, man. Like I knew we weren't going to talk anything about March '95 wrestling. It looks like Jeff Jarrett and Barry Horowitz are on now, but it was exactly what I hoped and dreamed this would be when we got together to talk about this. I hope someone gets some enjoyment. Like I'm sure there's some nerds out there that love talking VHS and backyard wrestling and the 90s that maybe got some enjoyment out of this, but I had a great time.
Yeah, this is very, very inside baseball. Is that the term?
Yeah,
That's
inside backyard wrestling.
yeah.
we need to find some and do like a live watch on air of it.
Oh yeah.
We'll do a WCF match and a USWF match, and
Nice. Oh yeah.
We'll throw them
Yeah,
up against each other.
that.
We'll do some live commentary.
Nice.
But this was fantastic. Obviously love having you as part of the network. You can catch Kevin on Cronoso every couple of weeks talking old wrestling, and I'm sure he'll be popping up. I know you got some plans for some 95 stuff as well. I know you got some different music things you had in mind. So can't wait to hear from that. We have tons of great content, especially WrestleMania season coming up. We'll have all kinds of stuff on YouTube as well as on all our podcast networks. You can find us on social media as well. Kev, I want to thank you. It's been a successful return to Behind the Connection. If anyone has any thoughts or feedback or other questions about 95 public access, let us know on the socials. And until then, stay connected. Talk to you soon.